Welcome back to the Perfectly Holistic Radio Show. My name is Pam, and I am so excited to have a very special guest with us tonight talking about a subject that for some people can be very woo woo, and for other people, it's like, yeah, bring it on, because we're all about mushrooms today and we're all about cats. So, we're going to talk to one of the leading experts, in my opinion, who he is writing, he's written books about this topic and he's studied extensively. So, Dr. Silver, welcome to the show, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us tonight. And look, we even have cat guests here as well.
We have cats.
We
We've
have
got a lot of cats.
we
Yes, we
have
do.
cats. Yeah, I think I have a couple
Mhm.
that are going to show up tonight with us. But yeah, this is so exciting. I know that you have been with real mushrooms for a little bit now, and you've
About
been doing
4 years.
yeah, and you've been doing a lot of research and study on mushrooms and pets and how they can benefit. And so we're going to talk about a lot of different areas of that tonight. But before we get started, I want to just welcome anyone who is popping in. We are streaming on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube tonight. And if you have a question, drop it in the comments. Now, if you're on Instagram, we can't see your comments. So come over to our YouTube page or our Facebook page, and you can drop your comments over here and I will take a look at those. So let's dive in. We've got a lot to cover tonight. First of all, why are mushrooms so powerful, and why should, just in general, and then we can talk about how they are so powerful for not only people, but we're here to talk about cats. So, yeah.
Well, I don't know why they are so powerful, but I can tell you that they are powerful because they have in them multiple different active ingredients,
Mhm.
not just one, but maybe 10 different ingredients, all of which have similar properties but different properties. And so they work together synergistically on certain things, but they also work independently. So, who knew that? I mean, we think about mushrooms as being good for the immune system. That's kind of,
Mhm.
I think, the first thing that we think about. And that's due primarily to something called beta glucans, which is a form of fiber in the mushrooms. But there's other things in the mushrooms like terpenes. And terpenes are what gives food its aroma. Like when you
Mhm.
squeeze a lemon and you can smell that, that's a terpene. That's called limonene. And they're small little molecules that actually cross the blood-brain barrier so they can affect behavior. They have a nice odor, but they also can calm you down. They can have all sorts of other properties as well. Mushrooms have those as well. And they have many, many other properties. I don't want to get into all the gory details about it, but that's really, why they are. And mushrooms are part of what we call the fungal kingdom.
Mhm.
And us humans and our pets and our cats are part of the animal kingdom. And our plants, they're part of the plant kingdom. So the mushrooms themselves have their this entirely huge kingdom, and within that kingdom, mushrooms are the highest evolved of all the fungi that are in the fungal kingdom, just like humans are the most evolved as well. And so um, that's why I think they're so strong.
That's so cool. And I know we were talking backstage prior. There's a little bit of crossover between DNA. Can you explain?
Well, way back when, back in the early
Yeah.
primordial soup, there really were just single-celled organisms, and originally there was one single-celled organism that split off into plants, and then split off into this other combined that wound up splitting off later into fungal and animal. So for that reason, animals and fungi share 30% of our DNA. And
Mm,
this may be one reason why fungi can be so toxic and pathogenic. At
yeah.
the same time, this might also be why they can be so beneficial, depending on which part we're talking about. So I
Yeah.
think so, and fungi are such an important part of our planet, of our world. They're the recyclers. When something dies, how does it? What makes it deteriorate? And go back into its individual parts, that then can feed other organisms. It's the fungi.
Mhm.
Fungi are the recyclers. They deteriorate. They rot things. Rotting things
Mhm.
is good because you want to get rid of them.
Yeah.
And when you rot them, you break it down into their basic nutrients, which then can feed bacteria or other fungi or animals. And so this is how our Earth continues to be recycled. If we didn't have fungi, I'm not sure what we would be doing. The planet would just be filled up with all this dead stuff that would be
Just there.
would deteriorate. Yeah,
Right.
they're super, super important in every regards.
And don't we have fungi as part of our microbiomes and our pets too? A portion or
Well,
do
they
it?
call that the mycobiome.
Okay.
The microbiome is the collection of all the organisms that are in the gut microbiome, of all the organisms that are in our bowel, that almost is like a whole nother organ. And
Mhm.
and depending on the balance of the bugs within the microbiome, it could be a very healthy organ or it could be a diseased organ. And so we can trace a lot of diseases to imbalances in those bugs in the bowel. And so there are fungi that are also part of the microbiome. There's protozoa, mostly bacteria are the major part. And when we talk about fungi, we're really talking more about yeast. We've
Mm,
heard about candida.
yeah.
Candida is a yeast that grows in the bowel of humans and animals, much less in animals, more in humans.
Mhm.
Um, and when there's too much of it, or it's a strain that's imbalanced, it can cause disease. Otherwise, it's a normal inhabitant.
Right.
Um, Likewise, there's other yeast that are found in the bowel. There's something called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is very similar to the yeast that we use to brew beer with, or to
Mhm.
bake breads with, or make
Mhm.
cheese with, or ferment wine. I mean, what would we do without the fungal kingdom? We wouldn't have wine, we wouldn't have beer, we wouldn't have cheese, we wouldn't have bread, we wouldn't have, anything, soy sauce, miso.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a very important kingdom, both in terms of the how it helps to recycle our planet, how it creates food for everything else that lives on the planet, and how it also seems to have very positive medicinal properties that can be of benefit to pets, cats,
Mhm.
humans, horses. Anything that lives can benefit from the good fungi that are out there. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Can you talk to our viewers about like what type of mushrooms should we be focused on using with our cats versus I know there's good and then there's toxic ones. So
Well,
people kind of
they,
have a little fear of mushrooms. So let's
yeah,
talk a little bit about the fear of mushrooms and
they say that there's millions upon millions of mushrooms on the planet, and of those, maybe 1% are toxic. But
yeah,
of course, if you eat that one toxic mushroom, it's a big deal. They
right.
say you can. There's a joke in the mycology community that you can eat any mushroom once, which is which is true. And some of the very toxic mushrooms are actually very, very tasty. It's almost
Mm,
like they're luring you in because they want to they're it's for them, it's a protection mechanism, or it's a way that they can spread their spores and diversify themselves.
mm,
So 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 there are mushrooms that you can eat, and many of the mushrooms that you can eat also have very positive health benefits to them.
yeah.
And if you're one of those people who is preparing fresh food for your cat yourself, versus purchasing good quality fresh food, or maybe you haven't made the transition yet and you're still feeding kibble to your cat, which isn't the best of foods for cats.
Right.
Then if you're cooking, then you could use mushrooms as part of what you're feeding your cat. Now, mushrooms are very fibrous. They've got a very thick fibrous wall, which is part of what makes them good. It's that fiber that in fact feeds the microbiome, but
Mm,
it's also that fiber that makes it really tough to chew, really tough to digest. A lot of the good quality of active ingredients in mushrooms are bound inside that fiber. So we really don't get the full benefit of a mushroom until we can cook it.
mm,
Cooking it is what releases all the goodies. And so I suggest that the best way, and they're kind of fibrous cooking. Most of our pets, our dogs and our cats, don't chew, you
mm,
know.
mhm.
So they
Yep.
just kind of inhale. So I
Yep.
suggest that if you do want to cook mushrooms, and something simple like the button mushrooms that you can buy at the supermarket, common button mushrooms, have been shown to have very good medicinal properties, in addition to tasting so good. And mushrooms are known to have a very high quality of protein in them as well. They've got maybe 25 to 50% protein, which is really good. And the rest of it's pretty much fiber. Almost no carbs, which is good because cats don't really use carbs.
Yeah.
Small amounts of fats, and the fats are good fats, but not a lot of them. So, but
Mhm.
it's a great food for a ketogenic diet, for the Paleolithic diet. Our cats are all kind of Paleolithic anyway. They like to eat, they eat fat and they eat protein, and that's probably the best part of their food. They do need fiber to help their bowels move and to help with hair balls and things like that as well. So
Yeah.
I suggest that you dice the mushroom up really small, and then that you cook it, either saute it, or the best place for cooking a mushroom is actually like in a soup or a stew. So, if you're doing, like, with some people will do a crock pot type of diet for their cats. They can make a big bunch of it with meat and vegetables and the other things that would be important to the cat. You could put the mushrooms into that, and it would give good benefit in terms of nutrition, but it also would provide some benefits to the immune system as well.
Mm.
So that's one way that you can get your mushrooms. Now, mushrooms are 90% water. So
Yeah.
in order to, if you've got a serious problem, just for wellness, a mushroom or two a day is probably plenty, But if your animal does have some problems, or you're concerned that you want to be preventing it from some other problems, you may need to give it more than what they would possibly eat, in their food. And cats, they're not the most eager eaters out there, although some are,
Mhm.
so I really wouldn't want to be dependent upon the cat eating the mushroom every day in the food,
Right.
if someday it might not like the taste of it, or whatever. So we also have mushrooms that, once the mushroom has been grown and harvested, you dry it and you powder it. And
Yeah.
so that powder can be mixed in with the food. And that's much stronger than the raw mushroom, because we've taken 90% of the water out, so it's more concentrated. And
Right.
by drying it, we've broken down that cell wall a little bit, which helps to make it more bioavailable. But the
Yes.
best way would be to take that dried powder and to put it in boiling water, or nearly boiling water, like 90 degrees centigrade, 100 degrees centigrade, it's boiling, for about 2 hours. That's what real mushrooms does when we are extracting our mushrooms to make them more bioavailable. So when people take them, they get a very strong effect. We put them in hot water, at the dried powder in hot water at 90 degrees for 2 hours, and then we dry it after. And then we dry it and powder it from there. And so that gives us an extract that's it's almost like we took the mushroom apart, into its individual pieces, so it'll absorb better. Then we kind of put it back together again. So you kind of have the whole mushroom deconstructed. So it's much more bioavailable. And so those are the types of mushrooms then that you could mix in with the food in small amounts. And
Mhm.
with cats, there's always a challenge getting new stuff into them.
Yeah.
I have my own approach to helping cats get used to something new. And with some cats, it's the impossible dream. But um, but especially if a cat has started out when it's been young with a wide variety of different foods. That's really
Yeah.
the best way. These cats that start out, or they're coming from the shelter, where the first food they see is kibble, it's like they imprint upon the kibble. They don't think there's any other food,
Mm.
which is awful, because it's, first of all, it's not that great food, and
Right.
secondly, you'd like to introduce something that would be healthy to them, because we know the best medicine is a good diet.
Right.
So, what I suggest is, of course, hopefully the cat's eating a wet food, because it's unlikely they'll eat a powder off that's adhered to their kibble.
Yes.
And, eating a tasty wet food, or maybe even using some special bribe food like a churu, or baby food like chicken baby food or something like that, or
Mm.
even a little bit of canned food that they might be really hot for, even some tuna. And then you start with a tiny amount,
Yeah.
because cats. One reason cats are so suspicious about new food is their liver doesn't do such a good job of detoxifying. And so over the millennia, and this is specific for cats, over the millennia, cats have had to be very cautious about what they eat, because they could die, because their liver doesn't do a good job of detoxifying it. So that's why, when you feed a dog, and do you have any dogs in your household?
I don't. No.
Okay. When you feed it, well, if you feed a dog, usually you put the food down, they just kind of run over and they inhale it, and that's
Yeah.
it. Cats, on the other hand, when you put the food down, they take some time first. They sniff it, you know.
It's
They're
different.
even if it's the same food, same place, same bowl, same time
Mhm.
of day, they're still sniffing it. And what they're doing is they're
This is
smelling because the olfactory apparatus is one of the best analytical laboratories there is, and they're sniffing it to see if there's anything in there that they're not familiar with. Because
mm,
have an aroma for something they're not familiar with, it might be toxic, and so they don't really want to try it. But if you're giving them such a tiny amount at first that they can barely smell it, then as you gradually increase it, they will already have been familiar with that smell because when it was in a teensy amount, they smelled it, but it wasn't so much to turn them off. And so
right.
this works for many, not for all, but it works for
Mhm.
many to kind of get them into it. So then you would take one of our dried mushroom powders,
Yep.
say an individual mushroom for a cat would be a mushroom species that I personally think is the best species for cats, called cordyceps. Although there's a lot, I mean, a lot of mushrooms are good for cats. The reason why I like the cordyceps mushroom is because it has a long history of being good for the kidneys and
Mhm.
and it has many many other properties. But it's my belief that that by supporting the kidneys in cats, 85% of all the cases of chronic kidney disease between dogs and cats are in cats, so they have a high likelihood of that developing. I
Mhm.
think it's a good preventative to use for them. And in addition, if you start the kitten out when they're new, that's the best time to introduce new stuff to the cat is when they're brand new. They don't know better, and and they're just kind of trying new solid foods. But the other benefit to a mushroom like cordyceps, and really any mushroom, is that the beta glucans, that fiber that I mentioned is so good for the immune system, it actually wakens up their immune system. So
Mhm.
when we do get around to vaccinating our cats, and most cats do get vaccinated at some point in their life, that we could wait a little longer, especially if they're indoor cats, not exposed to other cats, until they overcome maternal antibodies. Because when they nurse with the mama gives them protection for those vaccines that she's been vaccinated for through her colostrum. And
Mhm.
so they nurse, and that gives them protection for about 12 weeks, which is
Mhm.
protection against the things she's protected for. But then, so why vaccinate when it's earlier than 12 weeks of age? Because the maternal antibodies that she has
Yeah.
are to decommission the vaccine. It's not going to be able to work that way. So I wait until they're 12 weeks, even 16 weeks of age, but they would have had the beta glucans on board for at least a month, which preconditions their immune system. So when they do get vaccinated, they get a much stronger response, and that response lasts much longer. So if you're of the mindset that you want to do vaccination titers, that you don't really want to vaccinate very frequently, you want to give them a certain level of protection, but you don't want to have to keep boosting it because
Mhm.
more additional vaccinations can also cause problems with the immune system. This
Yeah.
is a technique to do. Start out, when they're kittens, getting them started on a mushroom like cordyceps. And there's another, and you mentioned earlier before we went on air about this new functional feline product that you
Mhm.
have a sample of. And the functional feline product, when I designed it, I put more cordyceps in it. So
Ah,
it'd be better for the kitties. So I really had in mind that this would be a great starter formula for kittens.
mhm.
It's got krill meal in it. I don't know if you're familiar with krill meal, but it comes from plankton from the Antarctica, and it's really rich in fatty acids like fish oil fatty acids.
Yeah.
It's really rich in phospholipids, which are really good for the brain and nervous system and liver. But it's also very rich in an antioxidant called astaxanthin.
Yeah.
That's what gives that's that red algae that gives that salmon that gives them that red color too. So that's kind of where I designed that formula specifically with cats in mind, thinking about starting them out as little kittens, getting their immune system all fired up. So when we vaccinate them, it works really well. We don't have to keep doing it. And we also are helping to support their kidneys. And we also know that at that age, they're most susceptible to these upper respiratory viruses that they get. And although there's no studies in cats, it's like it's awful. I want to get some done, and I will. But there are studies in children, you know,
Mm.
that
Mhm.
are in group homes where there's a high rate of upper respiratory disease. And they found that when they give these children beta glucans, the rate of respiratory disease in these houses reduces. And it's the same thing with cats. It's the sort of thing that I really think shelters would do
Yes.
well off to give all their animals these beta glucans. I think it would overall reduce the contagious disease that we see, in a shelter.
Sure.
And
You
a lot of mushrooms. I mean, cordyceps is just one of them, and we'll talk about some of the others too as we.
yeah. No, I love what you're talking about. I mean, for so many people who have adopted a pet from a shelter, including myself, they come home and they're fine for a day or two, and then they get the kitty flu, which is, it's just kind of a thing that gets passed around shelters. Sometimes it's viral. Sometimes there's a secondary bacterial infection that they develop or whatever. But I love the fact that if we could just get these shelters, instead of pumping them with a bunch of vaccines when they show up, pump them with mushrooms. You know what I'm saying? It would just make so much more sense.
Or
Because
pump them with both. I mean, I think there's a value to vaccinations, but I think because they're already immune compromised, because many of them are rescues,
Mhm.
condition them first with the mushrooms and then vaccinate.
Yeah, or tighter before you just vaccinate a cat that's an adult, because so many times these cats have already been vaccinated, but they don't test first, and they just automatically revaccinate every time a cat comes through the shelter.
Exactly.
So then they end up with even more compromised immune system issues. But I
Mhm.
love the fact that I mean, and I'm on board with you. Wait till they're 12 weeks of age or 16 weeks of age instead of giving them the typical three FVRCP, vaccines starting
Right.
8 or 9 weeks of age.
Yeah.
Doesn't make
Well,
a
but if a kitten didn't nurse from its mom,
yeah,
didn't get that antibodies, and then they're in a more risky place, and if so that's where I think that sometimes vaccinations can also be a good idea. But I agree. I think using mushrooms first is really the
yeah,
way to go. And I've heard so many stories of animals that have had upper respiratory or different types of chronic diseases that once they got on something like a mushroom, it really improved a lot.
that's amazing.
And there's
Hmm.
mushrooms that actually we use for allergies
Okay.
because they have antihistamine like properties.
Oh, that's big.
Mhm. We have a product called Five Defenders,
Okay.
and we've come out with a pet version of that called Pet Defenders,
Oh, I love it.
and it's soon is going to launch in a powder form where it's blended with krill meal, so it's very tasty. And
Mm,
so we're just trying to make our products um, more palatable, tastier,
yeah.
easier to administer, and
Yeah.
to have some added value in it. I mean, mushrooms have plenty of value themselves, but to give them a little added value as well is good. So
Exactly. So I think that's a great lead in to talk about there's a myriad of common feline ailments that I
yes,
mean, you saw as a vet for years in practice. And so, I mean, we know that cats typically they may have more propensity to develop certain illnesses or diseases depending on diet, depending on, their environment, what they're exposed to, and things like that. But can you talk about some of like maybe the most common ailments that cats struggle with, or diseases, or chronic kinds of issues? And can you recommend maybe a single or combo mushroom products? And is there a time when the synergistic effect of multiple mushrooms at once is better than just an individual mushroom?
well, we that's a good question. There are some studies, just a few,
Mhm.
um, that show that you can get a synergy when you combine mushrooms, and I think part of it is just that you get there's so many moving parts in a mushroom. I call them my Swiss Army knives, and so
Yeah,
and so you get a couple of mushrooms together that have a lot of properties that are similar, and they can really work that way synergistically. I think
mhm,
that's what we have. One formula I mentioned, the Five Defenders or
mhm.
the Pet Defenders,
Defenders.
has five mushrooms in it, and it's our most popular formula. And I think in part because it is very effective. And it does contain two mushrooms that have that antihistaminic property to it,
Nice.
the reishi mushroom and the chaga mushroom.
Mm.
And so that's one situation in which, one formula has those two mushrooms in it, plus three other mushrooms that are very powerful for immune enhancing. So something like that could be, a really good product to use with upper respiratory, or to use for, vaccine competence. It doesn't
Mhm.
have the cordyceps in it. That's why I put in the functional feline the five defenders plus cordyceps plus lion's mane. So
Nice.
we've really already discussed two common problems that we see with cats: um, the chronic kidney disease, and upper respiratory.
Mhm.
So other types of conditions could be something like bladder issues,
Yeah.
in terms of bladder stones. And so not as there's mushrooms with pets are pretty new, and I've been working really hard trying to find out, trying to figure out what mushroom is for what. And I don't know that there is necessarily a mushroom specifically for each condition. But I will say that with crystals and bladder stones, it's so dependent upon the cat's metabolism and
Mm.
how they respond to food, and they may even respond to mushrooms in certain ways. There's just not enough information. I don't have enough information to be able to sound smart and say, yeah, good for this or good for that. But I will say there's one mushroom called chaga. Chaga is it's not really a mushroom, but it's like a canker that's on a tree. It looks like cancer. And actually, in the old days, the ancients would look at something like that and say, that tree has cancer. I wonder if that would help a human's cancer, because they call that the doctrine of signatures. There's something in nature looks like an organ or something,
Yeah.
and maybe it actually is. Lion's mane. I don't know if you've ever seen what lion's mane looks
Yeah.
like. It kind of looks like a brain.
It's beautiful.
Well, it is, and we know now that lion's mane is so very good for the brain. So what I'm getting at, is kind of, I digress a bit here, is that chaga has in it oxalates, and we measure our oxalates in our chaga, and we do kind of a hot water extraction that helps to reduce our oxalates.
Mhm.
But for someone who's not using our product, that might be wanting to give it to their cat, we know there's two types of stones in cats. One
Mhm.
is a struvite stone, but one's an oxalate stone, and they're
Yeah.
kind of two sides of the same coin. So in this case, I would say avoid chaga,
Yeah.
and avoid five defenders or pet defenders if your cat has a tendency to have bladder stones or crystals. Um, I found that for me in my practice, which I haven't been in for a while, I used to use an amino acid with these cats that would acidify the urine, because in acid urine, the crystals, at least the struvite crystals, go into solution. So I would use an amino acid called methionine.
Mhm.
Thionine's a sulfur-rich amino acid, so when the body metabolizes it, it creates like a weak sulfuric acid. So it makes a very weak acid. So the crystals will go into solution and not be a problem.
Mhm. That's very.
So there's three sort of. I can't really. I didn't really give a specific mushroom for bladder, but that's okay.
That's okay.
And then, I think that we see with cats commonly GI issues.
Mhm.
Many times those kittens, they get those chronic yellow, smelly, pasty stools that have little bubbles coming out of them. You've seen those. It's oftentimes we think it's like a chlamydia or some sort of an infectious organism. But I think giving a cat the beta glucans that would be in a mushroom, and
Okay.
there's three mushrooms, single mushrooms, that I think would be most palatable to a cat, and each of them have beta glucans in them, which turn the immune system on to better fight diseases. And lion's mane historically has been used for GI issues.
Oh wow.
so lion's mane is the most is very palatable, as is cordyceps, as is another mushroom called tremella. So I would probably use lion's mane in a cat for that, because I think there's also an emotional component to that diarrhea that I've seen in kittens. And lion's mane has a great deal of ability to kind of settle the emotions, to kind of calm you down. It has a direct effect on the nervous system because of the terpenes that are in it. And that's one reason it's the most popular mushroom in North America today, because humans are also having a lot of mental health issues, especially around memory, and dementia, and cognitive issues. And they're finding that lion's mane contains these molecules that really kind of turn the brain back on again. And so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But originally lion's mane, they used to use it for the GI system.
Okay.
So I think it has, and when you think about it, they talk about the brain gut axis.
Yes.
That's what it's doing. It's doing that kind of putting the two together. So oftentimes we talk about serotonin. And if you've heard about serotonin, it's amino acid that it's formed from the amino acid tryptophan, but it's a neurotransmitter that's the very calming neurotransmitter. But we also have found that serotonin can be produced by the microbiome and then travel to the brain. So I'm taking a course on microbiome right now, and we're learning that if you transfer the stool from a calm animal to an anxious animal, the anxious animal becomes calm, because it's getting them because there's emotional stuff in the microbiome as well, like these neurotransmitters, like serotonin, that a certain set of bacteria will be creating. So lion's mane, we haven't seen any studies in cats. There is one study in dogs with lion's mane showing benefit to the microbiome when it's just added as a powder to dog kibble. And dog kibble is not much better than cat kibble, which we don't think either are really all that good. It's ultra processed food. It'll do in a pinch, but it's not going to promote long-term health in most animals. So there's GI, there's upper respiratory, there's
what about heart? Talk about heart disease.
Yeah, my Maine Coon has a hole in his heart.
Okay. And that's kind of a genetic predisposition for Maine Coons, right?
It is. I know. It's like it's such a yin yang, because they have such an amazing personality. It's like it's such an amazing cat, and yet the universe somehow can't let something be perfect. There always has to be a flaw somewhere, So not only does he have a hole in his heart, and it's a small enough hole that the cardiologist said it's not going to pose any long-term problems, but you put your fingers over his chest, you can feel the vibration of it. He has hip dysplasia, and he also has gingivitis. So those are some things. Okay, and that heart. Thank you.
Heart, circulation, circulatory, cardiovascular.
So cordyceps actually can be very good for the heart. It's good for the circulation. It's good for the lungs and the kidneys. So it's good for all of that. So and it's very palatable. The other mushroom that I would use for the heart is not very palatable to anybody. It's very, very bitter. But the bitterness is actually a good part of why it's so effective. And it's called reishi. And reishi is also known as the Ganoderma lucidum mushroom. And I think it's really the mother of all mushrooms, quite frankly. I take a lot of it every day, mostly in capsules, but I do like the bitterness a little bit. I'll put it in my tea, just to have my coffee, just to have something really bitter. But reishi is very good for the heart. And what's interesting is that not only is it good for the cardiovascular heart, I have actually an arrhythmia in my heart that it skips a beat every once in a while, especially if I'm anxious. And when I take the reishi, that doesn't happen.
Wow.
So I know that it has that effect. So it's good. It's good for cardiac function. But what's interesting is that in Chinese medicine, they link the heart to the mind and to the emotions. And the heart's agitated, the mind's agitated. Well, reishi is known to calm the mind as well is calm the heart. It works on both hearts, the heart that's the mental heart and
Part of it, yes.
as well. So it's pretty cool that way.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. What about is there a mushroom for that helps like pancreas or stomach digestion? I mean, we talked a little bit about GI issues, but we kind of pointed more towards stool and things like that. But is there anything that you can think of that would help with the actual pancreas or just breaking down the
Well,
situation?
when it comes to pancreatitis,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
chronic pancreatitis, acute
Yeah.
pancreatitis that they have to be hospitalized, they're vomiting, they can't hold anything down. But
Yes.
afterwards, then they can have chronic pancreatitis. It just kind of simmers for a long time. And actually, the chronic pancreatitis can ultimately destroy some of the cells in the pancreas and can lead to diabetes,
Yeah.
especially if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates to begin with. So, the mushrooms that I would recommend so, so antioxidants are known to benefit chronic pancreatitis. If you have a case of chronic pancreatitis, you should be taking antioxidants. Anything, even vitamin C, vitamin E. But have naturally occurring antioxidants in them. Plus, they have these beta glucans in them and the chitin, which is fiber that feeds the good bugs in the bowel. So it's
Yeah.
going to be really good for the bowel as well. Really good for the pancreas as well. Really good even for the gingiva in the mouth.
Mm,
In particular, I'm specifically thinking about shiitake mushroom.
okay.
Shiitake mushroom is the tastiest mushroom there is. So it's very easily added to the food.
Mm-hmm.
They also have done some studies where they've taken like a shiitake powder and made it like into a liquid and then did like an oral rinse and it helped with gingivitis. And part of that reason is because the mouth has its own microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mushroom actually helps to improve the microbiome in the mouth as well. So I would look at shiitake. I would also look at another mushroom called maitake.
My
Both of
talk.
those are in the five defenders, and the five defenders would be fine to use for GI issues. It
Mm-hmm.
has the bitter reishi in it, which bitter is good for digestion. It has the turkey tail, which is a good antimicrobial, but also very good um, for the microbiome. And it has the chaga. So, and the chaga has a lot of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant terpenes in it. So the five defenders would be good. I think shiitake, maitake is individual mushrooms, maybe as part of the diet, as part of food, could be used as part of food for that. Um, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't say we're just going to use a mushroom for the digestive system.
Correct. Correct.
We'd like to use some probiotics, and the functional feline and the companion for that for dogs is called the daily dog. It contains a fungal probiotic in it called Saccharomyces boulardii. I mentioned a little bit
Mm-hmm.
before. It's a yeast. It's a good yeast that really helps to support the microbiome. And there's good studies in the dog. Again, nothing in the cat,
Yeah.
but good studies in the dog showing that it can help with diarrhea that comes from taking antibiotics, that it helps to improve leaky gut, those sorts of things. And as a yeast, as a spore forming yeast, it's stable at room temperatures, so it
Nice.
doesn't have to be kept refrigerated as well. And the functional feline, it's got a pretty goodly amount. It's got about 2 billion organisms per serving, which is
Nice.
a decent amount.
Yeah. Okay, that brings me to another thought. There's a lot of senior cats out here who
Yes.
might have more mobility, joint inflammation, things like that, and just aging process. I think just for like the lion's mane obviously would be great for just the cognition for senior pets who might have that. Is it sundowner syndrome? Or,
Exactly. We see that in cats and dogs both. Yes,
yeah,
and we don't have any studies yet, but there's a lot of anecdotal reports about how it can help dogs that have sundowners,
yeah.
and not as much information about cats, but I do believe that there is some information that shows that it helps cats as well. So that would be lion's mane
Mm-hmm.
for that kind of senior um, geriatric senility, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yep. Yep.
Cordyceps is also a really good mushroom. and for geriatrics, because it's good for weak hind end. It's good for weak streams of urine, or if they can't hold their urine in. Um, it actually helps to stimulate testosterone production,
Mm.
which can be good even if they've already been neutered. There is other tissue in the body that
Yes.
can produce testosterone. Good for the lungs. You know, lungs are one of the weakest parts of the body, especially as you age.
Mm.
Also, is good fermentation. You know, and the heart, and also has an effect on energy production. Something called ATP
Mhm.
is created by cordyceps mushroom. Plus, cordyceps and reishi are both what we call adaptogens. This means that they help the body to adapt to stress, but they do it specifically through the pituitary hypothalamic adrenal axis. So it's specifically an axis that creates the stress hormone
Yeah.
that starts at the brain and then goes down, and then the adrenal glands produce cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Mhm.
Or if it's a fight or flight situation, like extreme stress, then it's the adrenal glands that are going to produce the epinephrine for the fight or flight thing. So cordyceps and reishi are both the key here. In a cat, I'd say reishi is probably the impossible dream, but cordyceps is very achievable in that regards.
Yeah.
So
And
definitely would be good for that.
that makes me think of just blood. You know, because when the blood, as we get older, let me see if I can speak. The blood can become thicker and less viscous, and that can lead to obviously problems. But is there anything in particular in your experience that you have seen that really helps support the just healthy blood properties with mushrooms? Would that
I
be
think
heart circulation?
I think you're on the right. I think you're on the right track. I think it's all mushrooms. Mushrooms have a lot in common as well as being, you know, some specific things like I'm mentioning with cordyceps, and it's really it's the effect of the beta glucans on the immune system.
Mhm,
It's the effect of the fiber on the microbiome that I
mhm.
think are going to improve a lot of blood parameters. Plus, we know that mushrooms are active. They go into the bone marrow.
Mm,
They go into the bone marrow and they actually have an effect on stem cells that are in the bone marrow. And it's the stem cells in the bone marrow that produce our red cells,
yeah.
produce our white cells, produce our platelets, you know, those sorts of things. And so so I think that I think all mushrooms would be good for that. And speaking of stem cells and speaking of the bone marrow, you
Mhm.
know, let's talk about cancer a little bit.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up.
Cancer's big, you know, especially lymphoma, you know, and is it lymphoma or is it, you know, is it is it inflammatory bowel disease in cats?
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
small cell lymphosarcoma versus inflammatory bowel disease is almost impossible to differentiate
Yeah.
because I think they're two sides of the same thing, you know. I
Mhm.
think it's very similar. And so, so looking at getting mushrooms into the animal
Yeah.
to help improve the immune system vigilance against these cancer cells, and many of these cancer cells are also part of the immune system. So we're trying to re-educate the immune system, and a lot of that happens in the bone marrow, where the beta glucans and those molecules go directly to the stem cells to try to get them to be healthier. And so the mushroom that we think of most for cancer is called turkey tail,
Mm,
and it historically has had the longest history of popular use for cancer, in part because it grows all over the world, everywhere,
yeah,
um, and it has the highest number of beta glucans in it of
right.
any mushroom. Second highest number of these terpenes. Reishi has the highest number of terpenes, but turkey tail has a second, and so it's very powerful. There's studies with it in dogs that were successful with a very nasty splenic cancer, and there are
Mm,
studies with it in humans, and we see, you know, so it has a wide range. But the question is, how palatable is it to cats? Now we just created a new form of turkey tail where we have it blended with with krill meal in the
right.
hopes that they'll eat enough of it that'll be helpful. But
Yeah.
cordyceps is also really good for cancer and good for lymphoma, and
Mm,
probably a lot easier to give to a cat. Although if you could mix the cordyceps with the
turkey tail.
with 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 the turkey tail, you might have an even better chance at it. I think that it's best to treat these things as soon as you find out that there's something wrong. I
Mhm.
think it's best to treat them before you know there's something wrong, in a preventative way.
Yeah.
And I think that if you do get the diagnosis of cancer, then I think you need to try to see how high you can get the amount of mushroom into your cat. And any mushroom is fine. The more you get in there, the better it is. You know, cordyceps would be good, lion's mane would be good, turkey tail would be good, but whatever you can get in there, that's something.
And when you talk about as much as you can get in them,
Hmm.
like what kind of guidelines would you tell? Like somebody probably
Well,
have a recommendation, but you
yeah,
can probably give a little more than that if there's a sick animal, right? Or some
um,
animal fighting
remember that
something.
animals have to be partners.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
that's true.
unless you put a feeding tube in them and force the medication in them, which isn't really very pleasant to do
Yeah,
on a
yeah,
long-term basis.
yeah.
Um, but Yeah. So the guidelines that I've made, have to do with the real mushrooms products themselves because that's what I'm most familiar with. That's what I know the potency, and that's what I have the
Sure.
most experience with. So I've basically come up with a baseline amount that
Mm-hmm.
would be an eighth of a teaspoon of the powder, okay, for every 10 to 20 pounds of body weight per
Gotcha.
day. So basically an eighth of a teaspoon for a kitty cat.
Yep.
And then that would be kind of maintenance. And then when you want to give it more because it's got a bigger problem and you want to get more in there, then you try to sneak as much more as you can get in there. If
Mm-hmm.
dogs are good eaters, I tell people, you're limited only by your dog's capacity to eat the stuff
Yeah.
and your budget. you know.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
That's.
and we do see with some animals they will develop diarrhea
Mm,
the first time they take a mushroom, and we think that is in part because it contains such high fiber, it just kind of gets things moving. So I
mm,
always suggest, no matter what the problem is, who the dog is, who the cat is, that you start small and
yeah.
you gradually work your way up. Even if it's an emergency and you're really uptight and you want to get it as much in there as you can, you're going to make a mistake by starting too quickly. If the animal reacts, it's going to be a lot harder to get back up on that horse and ride again or
Yeah.
deal with another brown spot on their expensive white carpet. You know,
That's,
so I think you need and really mushrooms are not emergency interventions. They are superfoods. They
yeah.
work best when they're given a little bit every day for long periods of time. Now,
Mm,
there may be some rescue aspects of mushrooms, but I wouldn't count on it. It's not really
right.
not an emergency intervention.
It's not for acute purposes.
No, but I mean, there are times when you could
You
do
could.
that. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, I made these soft chews called relaxed chews. and and it has reishi in it and it has lion's mane, which are both very calming,
Mm-hmm.
and they could work, but they're not going to work on day one. They
Right.
might, but they probably won't. So I
Yeah.
also put in there tryptophan,
Mm-hmm.
and I put in there theanine, which gives green tea its zen, and I
Yeah.
put in there catnip, and I put in there valerian root, and I put
Mm-hmm.
in there lemon balm, and I put
Yeah.
in there passion flower.
Excellent.
So what happens is the herbs and the amino acids will give an immediate sense of calming and
Yeah.
chill, and then the mushrooms will gradually start to build up over time, and so you get a very profound effect.
That's amazing. Um, a lot of times we hear the term immunomodulators, and some people may not know what that means. Can you explain to our viewers what that means exactly?
Yeah, well, modulation is not meant to be stimulation, Modulation means that it kind of balances the immune system based on where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if the immune system is overactive,
Yeah.
immune modulation will make it less active. If the immune system is underactive, immunomodulation will bring it up.
Mm.
So some people think with immune that you say immune stimulant, that you might stimulate the immune system too much. Let's say you have autoimmune disease, which is the immune system acting in a rogue fashion, attacking yourself. So you don't want to make it more powerfully attacking yourself. So that's what immune modulation means. And in most cases, mushrooms are immune modulators. We can even give reishi mushroom with autoimmune disease, with rheumatoid. We don't see problems with it because it balances the immune system versus sending it up or setting it down. Immunosuppressive versus immunostimulant. Immunomodulation is in the middle.
So that's a very important thing for people to remember. And it's really the wisdom of the body knows how to use that, right? It's not going to
Exactly.
throw things out of mouth because it's, I mean, technically it's in a supplement form most likely versus a food form, but the body knows how to use food, and it won't, like, you can't give too much of a food to get a benefit of a certain nutrient or whatever, because the body will use what it needs and pee out the rest or poop out the rest or whatever. But unlike medication, you can you can go overboard or not enough, right? And the body doesn't know how to
Exactly.
regulate that because it is not something in its natural recognizable state. Correct?
Well, and also when a nutrient is
Mm,
food bound,
yes.
you don't need as much of it to get a better effect. For instance, 70 milligrams of vitamin C in its natural context in food, let's say
Yeah.
it's in broccoli or something, is as powerful as 700 milligrams of ascorbic acid.
Oh,
So
nice.
you don't need as much in the food, and you get a better effect from that.
Sweet.
Um, they talk about we don't want to use antioxidants with chemotherapy, but they don't have any problems telling you to eat berries, or eat carrots or things like that that have antioxidants that are naturally occurring in them. So it's really only the chemical antioxidants that
Mhm.
seem to have the biggest issue with chemo. And most people these days aren't really even we don't even hear those kinds of admonitions about not using antioxidants with chemotherapy. Now they're just saying it's with radiation they're recommending against.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Very interesting, considering we want to boost the immune system. um, we are almost out of time, but I wanted to just
I
ask.
can't believe that.
I
How did
know,
that happen?
I know, it always happens this way. But is
Mm.
there anything that we haven't covered that you would want to just wrap up with, that clients, viewers could really benefit from knowing? If there's any area of mushroom that we haven't covered or talked about that you want to leave people with?
I did just remember another disease,
Oh, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
feline asthma.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Feline asthma, actually, again, I might be sounding like a broken record, but cordyceps for
Mhm.
that, because cordyceps supports the kidneys and supports the lungs. And in Chinese medicine, we believe that asthma is an imbalance between the kidneys and the lungs. And so, even in the Chinese materia medica, they
Mhm.
have cordyceps down, not for feline asthma, but for human asthma.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
their meridians close together, or do they? I'm just wondering how that.
Um, no, it's there's a relationship between the kidneys and the lungs as far as the energy of the kidney is supposed to go up to the lungs and control its expansion.
Mm,
So
okay.
that's why you have that kind of wheezing type of thing with
Interesting.
asthma.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, wow, this has been fascinating. I'm going to put all the show notes here for you guys who are watching the replay. Um,
Mhm.
where can people find you? And I think you have a book that's pretty awesome about mushrooms,
I
right?
do that. Yeah, that's well. The book is pretty good. Yep, it's gotten a lot of good reviews. I never thought of myself as a writer, but apparently I am. It's called There's a Mushroom for That, and it's on Amazon. And it's a good place to get it. And it has a lot of information in it about the use of mushrooms and about the use of cannabis. And it has 7 different conditions that I've written stories about in terms of patients that I've seen. It
Hmm.
has allergies, anxiety, arthritis, cancer, bowel disease, epilepsy, and wellness.
Nice.
I it most of the diseases are about dogs, but
Mhm.
in the anxiety section, I cover both dog anxiety and cat anxiety because they manifest a lot differently in
Mhm.
terms of household soiling and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm with Real Mushrooms, so we have a Facebook page. People can check it out. We do live events where we answer questions once a month. We have a lot of educational material on our website for pet parents as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess I could give you my email address if people wanted to reach out to me directly, and I can
Sure.
give that to you, and you can
I can put
maybe
it in the
post it.
show notes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Okay.
Mm.
Well, this has been fascinating, and I hope everybody who is watching or who's catching this replay is finding some very helpful information or tips. And I encourage you guys to experiment. If your cat is struggling with any of these conditions, just pick out one of
Mhm.
these mushrooms and start trying some things.
Yeah,
Um, and
and
don't try it
start.
for a day. Try it
Yeah.
for like what, 2, 3 months. Give it some time
Hmm.
to like manifest and work.
And start slowly with a little bit and work your way up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, this is fascinating. Thank you so
Oh,
very much for your time and for
thank you so much
sharing
for
your knowledge.
inviting me.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
I appreciate you so much and all that you do for our pets. So,
Thank you.
you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll be back with you next month for another show. Thank you guys. Have a good night.